Oh, 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 oh. And yeah, Periscope too. And let me do titles. Copy, titles, update all. There's a little bit too much of me. One.
Now look, you do that, you know you're gonna be banished.
Hey everybody, this is Jacquie Luqman.
And I'm over here on the side. I'm in Shahid Luqman.
There he is.
There we go.
And this is live in Luqman Nation, Coffee, Current Events, and Politics. And today is January 3rd, 2018. We survived 2017, and we are sitting here, survivors of the train wreck that was 2017, and just amazed that we made it this far.
Yeah, this is our first show back of the new year, and January 3rd, so I like to say happy birthday to my father.
Happy birthday, Pop!
I don't know if he's watching or if he'll join, but I already did the son. I performed my sonly duties, and and spoke with my father and everything. But he's 71 today. A very good American, good guy, Army veteran. Basically, I'm proud of my father. So anyway, I just want to wish him a happy birthday, and wish all of you out there a happy new year.
Happy New Year. Do we have audio over there, hon? Can you tell?
Let's see.
Let's do a little experiment. Make sure we've got. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. We're good on the audio. Let us know, you guys, if we start to have technical issues. As you can see, we went back to the single frame because we have personal computing stuff here. We don't have studio quality stuff, so our personal computers, our PCs, can't handle a big old frame. that we tried to do with both of us in the frame. So we're back to our original format. And going into 2018, I guess we need to set some ground rules.
Yeah, I mean,
for going into the new year, because there was a lot of crazy last year.
There was a lot of crazy. Like you said, we survived the new year, and I don't really like the resolution thing because I feel like at my age, I'm not going to change that easy. But there are some things that I think that I would like to adopt going into the new year. Some type of behavioral changes and adjustments, and Jackie, I just wanted to share a few of them with you.
Okay.
Number one, 2017, we dealt a lot with what I call the progressive behavior police, especially those who want to tell me how to eat, what I should eat, and all this, those type of things. 2018, leave me alone. 2018, look, I'm gonna make some adjustments. Don't get me wrong, but look. Today, in the news today, there were people that were talking about, that I should drink raw water. I had friends on Facebook that was telling me that I should drink raw water because apparently the water that I'm drinking now is not good, because it has all of these additives and
nasty chemicals.
Nasty chemicals. And if I want to get back to nature, if I want to go back to, to a much purer time, at least physically, then I should flush my system out with raw water the way nature intended. Well, that's all well and good. But there's a study that just came out, Jackie, that, that doctors are warning us about the consumption of raw water. It appears that raw water, for those of you who don't know what raw water is, it's just water without treatment. It's not chemically treated, and it's just water out of a stream or running brook or something without going through
rain, pure rainwater,
without any treatment. Well, doctors are now saying that that's causing people health problems. That they're finding arsenic in this water. They're finding animal droppings and all kind of stuff. And people, let me tell you something. The reason why I never jumped up on board with this whole purity movement when it comes to food and drinks and stuff is the fact that our entire environment is toxic. You know what I mean? Our entire environment. There's nowhere in a country as developed as the United States is. In a country where we got to where we are economically through industry, the fact that regulations that is placed upon industries is basically a recent phenomenon. Most of us who came from major urban centers, we all know the stories about how companies were just throwing pollutants in our waterways, and I mean, and how they were just polluting the environment. I'm from New Jersey, so I mean, come on.
The entire state.
The entire state was a toxic dump. So no matter what you try to do, whether it's the air, whether it's the sea, whether it's the whole environment is toxic. And though we've made some changes as far as cleaning up some of these areas, and though we made some progress in making things a little bit better for our consumption, please spare me with the raw this and raw that. They had another story today that talked about organic milk. Now, I had the same people that was beating me in the head about, if you're going to drink milk, AD, you ought to drink organic milk because, the cows are grass fed and they're this and they're that. And the same folks that got me into all of this, now there's a story that we saw today on CNN that stated that the raw milk industry now is going through a financial crisis because guess what? Y'all moved on. So now it's no longer, now the raw milk ain't good anymore. Wow. The organic milk isn't good anymore. So now many of you moved on to almond milk and coconut milk and cashew milk and all that stuff that really don't produce milk.
None of these things have teeth.
None of these things, that really doesn't produce milk. But but then again, now the herd went from organic milk. Now it's this other stuff. And look, I don't knock anybody's personal choices. If you want to drink organic milk or almond milk or whatever you want to do. What I'm saying is I don't have the time or patience to follow this train with y'all. I drink 2% low fat regular milk. That's what I drink.
And a lot of it too.
Yeah, I've been a milkophobe since I was a kid.
A milkophile.
Milkophile, is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah, because phobe is
is the fear of
Yeah, phobe is the fear of it. Milkophile, and I've been like that since I was a kid. So I'm not giving up milk, to the chagrin of many of you, but what I'm saying is that's one of my rules for 2018.
Okay.
I'll make modified changes because my health demands it, but please leave me alone about what I put in my mouth.
I like that rule, especially as you said, since the trends change so frequently. I mean, for a while it's all, oh, let's all flock to this one thing and it's so much better for all of us, and then people get tired of that, and then people spend all this money and make all this investment on this one thing that's supposed to change our lives, and then the next 6 months people come up with something new. That other thing is not good enough, and we got bigger fish to fry. We literally, seriously do have bigger fish to fry, aside from policing what people put in their mouths, especially since the air we breathe is contaminated. That's the reason why this natural water craze is making people sick, because the very environment, the ground, the air, everything is contaminated. And there's a reason we treat drinking water.
Right.
There's a reason you treat it. There's a reason it's not a good idea unless you're up in the mountains somewhere and you are drinking water directly from an icy cold mountain stream. There's a reason you shouldn't just drink water from a stream.
Exactly.
So I like that rule. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. So what else? What other rules do you have?
Well, and then another rule is this: I am not going to entertain racist trolls.
Oh.
Last week, we did a stream on Erica Gardner,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a pretty emotional stream for us.
Mm-hmm.
And look, we've been around long enough. The trolls are coming. I like the trolls because the trolls let me know that somebody's listening.
You do like the trolls.
I do. I like the trolls. But 2018, I'm not going to pay too much attention to the racist trolls. Those of you who've been with Jacqueline and I for a while, you know where we stand. You know that that we do our commentary through the prism of through the lenses of Black nationalism,
Mm-hmm.
Pan-Africanism, and the way we see, the way we view the world through our own experiences, and we have the right to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But you got people that come on there and they got all their little racist bull crap. So and I see that Dr. Nichols on. Thank you, Dr. Nichols. Welcome.
Hey, Doc.
He could tell you about the racist trolls.
Oh.
I could never. I mean, what he went through recently. I give him all the credit in the world because he keeps his composure. He's a very intelligent man and a very decent human being. And I mean, just the way that he dealt with these racist, the racist feedback he gets, I learned a lot from him. And so I was telling Jacquie today when we was preparing for the show, I said, Jacquie, I said, I'm not going to get emotional when the racists come out, and not just white racists, even the so-called black racists, or what I say, our black detractors that come at us,
and the black people who hate black people.
Right, the black people who hate black people, and all that kind of stuff, in which we stop talking about black stuff, because it's so divisive. So look, if you come on this page, you get what you get. But we're not going to change. 2018 that's another rule. We're gonna stick with the way we do things, and that we're not going to sell out. So like I said, I get a lot of strength from the way Dr. Nichols handles the trolls, and I learned from him. So Doc, thank you. And so that's one of my rules. And my third rule is the fact that, yes, we just came from the gym.
Yeah.
So I am going to take better care of my health. I'm not getting any younger. I'll be 52 this year.
He's a sexy 50.
Well, yeah.
Sexy 50.
But I'm trying to take better care of my health and stuff like that. So those are minor changes that I need to do. But outside of that, it's business as usual. And here we are. It's another election cycle, especially in D.C. We have a mayoral race coming up. We have some local elections that's happening. And so, Jacquie, our agenda is the same, is that in 2018, we're going to continue to fight, continue to push, and continue to push for change that would benefit the communities that we live around, that we live in.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that we are definitely going to continue to do and do a lot more of is to give a little brief overview of like the current topics of the day, because a lot of this stuff we see what's being talked about on CNN and on MSNBC. Well, we don't pay any attention to MSNBC anymore, but on CNN, and we see things that everybody else is crowing about, and a lot of people just dismiss these things because they think these things are not important, especially to black people. But there are aspects of the current issues that are critical to the way black people need to pay attention to the way politics is done by the people who have the power. See, a lot of times it's not even we're paying attention to their policy, because their policy is bad enough. That's self-explanatory, right? A lot of times what we need to be paying attention to is the strategy.
Right, exactly.
Right, the strategy. How these people who have the power, especially these moles who have power now, and how they operate.
Right.
Like case in point, Steve Bannon.
The walking germ.
See, I was trying to.
I mean, look. I'm not the most handsomest guy.
Stop.
But what I'm saying is, I mean, somebody needs, this guy needs a penicillin shot or something. Every time I see this guy on TV, I mean, he looks like, like he just ate a bad bowl of chili or something.
You know what he reminds me of? Mm-hmm. He reminds me of the movie Braveheart. And remember the guy that William Wallace kept going to visit?
The guy that was wrapped up in bandages?
Yeah, who had syphilis. Right. I understand that Steve Bannon has some kind of a skin condition.
That was, what's his name?
Seriously.
The Bruce.
Yes.
The Bruce father
that was
or something.
That's
which he apparently made him before he got like that. Because I'm sure that he fathered him before,
Well, hey, you never know. You never know. But, okay, in all seriousness, people dismissed how important Steve Bannon was going to continue to be to the White House just because he was no longer in the, what was he, chief of staff?
No, he wasn't chief of staff. I can't
remember what position he had that everybody thought.
I'll find it out.
But yeah, we're also I'm also in premenopause, so don't ask me to remember what happened yesterday, because I don't know. My memory is just shot right about now. There's so much going on. But everybody thought that Steve Bannon would go away, and that Bannon was the hand that was controlling puppet Trump. And somehow people didn't believe that this man would continue to have influence on the White House. Well, obviously he continued to. Trump kept talking to this guy every day, and that should have been lesson number one for black people, because you know how we do when white people and a lot of black people focus on a politician who advocates for black issues, and then that politician or public figure is associated with someone who's unpopular. What's the first thing we do? We got to distance ourselves from that person. Oh, I can't be seen with Minister Farrakhan.
Right.
Because he's controversial. Oh, I can't be seen with Reverend Wright. I can't be seen going into his church because he's controversial. Donald Trump never, ever said that he would no longer associate with Steve Bannon. I don't know why people just assumed that he wouldn't. Because, it was Bannon who helped Trump shape his dog whistle message.
Right.
Because we're talking about Steve Bannon here, the founder and editor-in-chief of Breitbart, however you pronounce that racist garbage website. So here you have Bannon and Trump, who are still in this, long-gone relationship. Bannon is still providing Trump with whatever information, strategy, whatever it is, guidance he's providing him on an almost daily basis, even though he's not showing up at the White House every day. We got to get past the optics.
Right, exactly.
Of things. Just because somebody doesn't show up at the White House it does not mean that they no longer have the ear of the person who occupies the Oval Office. I don't know why people thought that Bannon would just, that Trump was going to denounce Bannon and, I'm not going to talk to him anymore because, I know he's a divisive figure. That ain't never happened. But today, though, Bannon came out and said that Trump's son having a meeting with some Russian lawyer, I guess it was, who was trying to, who promised that he had dirt on Hillary Clinton.
It was a meeting at the Trump Tower.
At Trump Tower. Listen to what was said. It wasn't that Bannon said that the meeting itself was a bad idea.
Right.
It was that it was held at Trump Tower. And of course, that it was public, that it wasn't a private. Because see, the only time you have a problem with what you do is when you get caught. So Bannon comes out today and he says that this meeting in Trump Tower was treasonous, and basically he said that the media was going to crack Trump Jr. like an egg, and basically he's throwing the ballast over the ship that he can afford to lose Trump Jr.
Right.
Because in the grand scheme of the white nationalist agenda, Trump Jr. is not important. So publicly distancing himself in that way to someone who really doesn't have any impact on policy and on the views of his base, of Trump's base, Trump's voters don't care about his kid. They care about what Bannon says. They care about what Trump says. And Bannon is perfectly willing to get his agenda pushed. He's perfectly willing to throw the son overboard publicly and have a little conversation with Trump in the background. Now look, Don, I understand this is unpleasant right now, and go ahead and make your tweets, but in order for us to continue, we got to do this because he's now becoming a liability because all of this it's coming out public now. Now let me just be real clear. I don't think this proves any collusion. That I still think that's ridiculous because there has been no irrefutable evidence that anybody influenced anyone to vote for Donald Trump who wouldn't have voted for him before. No outside entity changed votes, hacked voting machines, hacked voters' rolls, registered a bunch of illegitimate fake people to pad the voter rolls for Trump. None of that stuff happened. None of that happened. Actual human beings who were registered to vote went into their polling places and filled in the sheet, flipped the lever, or selected the little electronic thing, whatever they did, and voted for Donald Trump. That's what happened, y'all. And Russia didn't do that. Now, I'm not at all saying that there has not been some involvement with some people in Trump's cabinet to dig up dirt on Hillary Clinton. That's obvious. But the interesting thing is nothing that anybody could have provided about Hillary Clinton was different from what you and I have been talking about in regard to that woman for the past 2 years. So Bannon is looking at the political cost of coming out against Don Jr. And the cost to their political aspirations very low, to almost nothing.
Right.
So it's not like this huge dissension in the ranks of the Trump empire that people are making. CNN is making a huge deal about, oh my God, Bannon comes out and says that this meeting was treasonous. And no one's going to get indicted for treason. No one's going to jail. No one's proven any collusion. This was just a public jettisoning of a low-level person in the Trump-Bannon empire that they could afford to chuck off to the side.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think also that there was a love affair between Bannon and Trump, and to Trump's credit, Bannon actually did come in later. Trump had already won the primaries, and Bannon came in later. But Trump brought Bannon in the White House for a reason, and I think that the reason why Bannon feels so upset now, and why he's going on this scorched earth war policy that he's doing now, because now you can't shut Bannon up.
Yeah.
Before, I mean, they were like two peas in a pot. Trump was rubbing his back, he was rubbing Trump's back, and they was forming, they were circling the wagons. Yeah, they were circling the wagons when people came at them, at Bannon, about obvious national white nationalist overtones and those type of things, and Trump was right along with it. I think what happens is what happens all the time when people go to Washington. What happens is they find out that Washington has its own culture.
Right.
And so it's bigger than Trump. And so Bannon, he felt like, hey, we got a president that's going to work with us. We got a president that's going to wheel and deal with us. We're going to be able to take our little Breitbartisms and make them policy. And Trump was with all of that. At least on the surface, he was with all that. But see, what happens is now is that you're not just dealing with Trump, you're dealing with the Republican Party. And see, these guys are looking forward, and they're looking at the part where Bannon is a liability. I think Trump said that one of the reasons why he fired Bannon was because they said that they felt Bannon was the source of the leaks that were coming out.
Really?
That's what Trump said. Now, we don't know. I mean, who's the know? We don't have any proof whether Bannon was, the proof of the leaks or not. But what is clear, that there was somehow a disruption in their relationship. Now look how this thing went. When Bannon left, the first thing Bannon said was that, oh yeah, okay, I'm not in the White House no more, but I talk to Trump every day.
Right.
And see, what happens is that Trump is a slimy guy. Trump is a slimy guy. Trump's been slimy since probably since he came out of his mother's womb. And so what happens is that he used Bannon. He don't need him now. He don't need Breitbart now. Trump doesn't need him. So just like Omarosa was chucked to the side and all this other, Trump is all about Trump. And so what happens is that it was okay. Let me get Omarosa in here so they can see a black face, and the black people could know that I'm not really against them. In fact, I got a black woman in the White House, and she's going to help me shape policy to help Black America out. And we seen that was false. That was a ruse, and not just because of Trump. That Omarosa wasn't even sincere about it. So we spoke about that. But Bannon was a little bit more serious. And I think that's what it was. Unlike Omarosa, who went into the White House and basically was like, look at me, y'all. Here I am. Look at me, And she's Instagram and everything and all this stuff. Had no serious intention on really performing her job. But Bannon wasn't like that. Bannon said, I'm going to use this White House, and I'm going to use this White House to promote, the agenda that I feel needs to be promoted. And so what happened is the fact that, again, there was a disruption in the White House, and they, like I said, Trump doesn't need Bannon. So now Bannon feels hurt. He feels betrayed because that's the only time people do what he's doing right now.
Oh, that's okay. That's an
right. He feels betrayed.
Yeah.
He feels betrayed. He's like, man, you looked me in my eye, and you accepted this responsibility, and we were going to do this thing. But Trump is out for Trump, and Trump is out for the money boys, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I'm looking at some of the comments, and for people who don't understand the title about white people voting against their own interests, please don't try to read too much in that until we get to it. Because folks are losing their mind. Oh, it's not just white people. Oh, poor people voting against their interests. Look, calm down.
We'll get to it.
Calm down, and you see why we didn't write the article. We are actually presenting the article that was already written by someone else. That was their title, not ours. We just put the title for the. So if you got a beef, your beef is with the author of the article. So and we're going to get into that. But like again, with Steve Bannon, Bannon's on the outs. You know, you know what it reminds me of? If I can use a film analogy.
Yes.
The Godfather.
Why? How did I know you were going to use that film?
All right. Remember when Michael took over as the Don?
Yep.
And he was rearranging the hot, his crew around him. Tom Hagen. You know the consigliere. I can't.
Consigliere.
Yeah, consigliere. Right. Who was the consigliere of Don Corleone, the pop. But when Michael took over, he said, he kind of like booted Tom Hagen to the side.
Yeah.
To the point where it was like, and it was one part of the movie where Tom Hagen didn't understand why, these changes was happening. And Michael just coldly said, "You're out, Tom." Right? And now Tom Hagen remained loyal. But what I'm saying is the fact that he lost his usefulness. He was no longer useful in that capacity for Michael Corleone, who was going in a different direction than the father was maintaining. And you see the same thing here with Trump. Bannon and what he brings with him, even though in my view Trump, Trump is not much different ideologically as Bannon is. But I think that Trump is looking at it politically. Bannon's a liability, and the people around Trump is telling them that Bannon's a liability because they're not looking at Trump's era. They're looking at the White House. They're looking at Trump's second term.
Right.
And that's the thing. Politics is all about what's coming next. And so they're looking at Trump's second term. And they're saying, we can't afford a Bannon. You know what I mean? So, he has to take his hurt feelings somewhere else. But we're looking at a second term because trust me, Bannon in his populist way of viewing things, mainly for poor working class whites, that's not the agenda of the Trump White House, and that's not the agenda of Washington. Washington is never about working folks, black or white.
Right.
So so anybody that goes in there and try to seriously advocate for them, they'll play the politics about it. But in the end, man, it's all about, it's all about the money boys.
I like that. I like that. I love the analogy that you made, and so did Karen, so did Karina. Karina loved the analogy, the Godfather analogy. Yeah. And I like your take on it too. Even though I still, because I trust neither. I trust none of them. I don't believe anything any of them say. So, when Bannon comes out and is willing to throw Don Jr. under the bus, I really, and I don't care that Trump has tweeted something negative about what Bannon said. I really just feel like they've reached a gentleman's agreement on that. But I could be wrong. You might be right, because I hadn't thought about that Trump is looking at Bannon as a liability to his legacy, whatever horrendous apocalyptic world ending Morlock legacy that will be. So it is going to be interesting to continue to see how this plays out. Okay, but what's the takeaway for Black people in advocating for ourselves politically?
Right.
Don't let anybody else tell you who to align yourself with. Donald Trump knew that Steve Bannon ran a racist website when he met the man. He didn't care. He hired him on his campaign, on his staff, once in the White House. He knew some of the stuff that came out of Breitbart was just 2 steps short of Klan instructions. He knew that. And he had him in his White House because he needed Steve Bannon to shape that message coming out of that White House for his base.
And also, it also was a good message to his base that, hey, look, I got your back. You know what I mean? It's all about appearances, and that's what it was all about. It was all about appearances. But as Michael Corleone said, and that's what Donald Trump said, that Bannon lost his mind. So that's equivalent to you're out, Tom. You know.
That's,
So
yeah, that's a good point.
Right now, going to this article. Because like I said, people are losing their minds.
Yeah, let's get over there so y'all can.
Yeah, well, I mean, let before we go to the article. This one interesting comment, I believe, by Bar Teeters. He said the black community did the same thing. I imagine voting against our interests. They turned their back on the burn, and he had their backs. Not the shillery. We're not sure how deep the fraud is within the DNC, but we know it is fishy. Barb, you've been following us. I have no argument with you as far as black people voting against their self-interest. I don't look at it with the same understanding that you do about it being because black people didn't come out en masse for Bernie. I feel that black people vote against their interests because we keep supporting the Democratic Party that don't give any shits about us and that hasn't done anything for us, who run the cities that we live in mainly. We look at Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, and we look at other major cities where Democrats have been in power for decades. And yet, you know, things haven't changed for black people in those areas. And then we look nationally, and we just had 8 years of Obama, and you know he sang and danced his way through 8 years, and you know, again, I mean, black people have done worse under Obama than we have under you know, previous presidents. So I agree with you. I think that this loyalty that black people show to the Democratic Party. Now, you know, you could say that, well, the Republicans haven't really been in the business of courting our votes. You know, they haven't really been in the business of doing that. So in a two-party system, where do you go? You know, Jacquie and I supported Bernie Sanders as well as a lot of black people did. But then Bernie was to blame for that too. Bernie didn't have a very he didn't create a very good infrastructure where black people live. I mean, what I'm saying is he had photo ops where he visited urban, like he went to Baltimore, he did this, but he had to be forced to talk about black issues.
And he did those things later in his campaign.
Right. So he was forced to, you know, to address black issues, and to his credit, he did eventually. But I think by the time he came around to that, it was kind of too late.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it wasn't a serious courting of the black vote by Bernie Sanders. Bernie was talking a populist message himself, but his populist message was more inclusive. But with the experience that black people have politically in this country, economically in this country, you know, we need, you got to talk a different language to us. You know, because we have different needs. You know, and you know, we have different needs than other demographics. So, I mean, just coming to us talking about income inequality, well, hell, we've been experiencing income inequality since we got off the ships. You know, we've been experiencing wealth inequality since we got here. So, you know, that's nothing new for us to tell black people, oh, there's a big wealth gap. No shit. You know, yeah, I mean, you know, no shit. I mean, it's like, okay, yeah, well, you ain't got to tell us that. But the thing of it is that this is what we were talking about as far as putting things going forward. Now to construct, to teach, you know, we as the black community, when we engage Bernie Sanders or anyone else, we have, you know, first of all, there has to be a relationship where you know, those who want our vote have to listen to us. Right. You know, and not treat us as a community that you're going to tell us that you know what's good for us, that you know what's good for us, but that you will listen to us and listen to what we need. And we have people in our community that can express that. We have people in our community that can articulate our issues for us. And so, you know, that is where I feel that Bernie Sanders may have fell short. But he excited a lot of people in the black community. He did, and I think that we can't look at that. If you look at it, Hillary Clinton didn't excite a lot of people in the black community, which is one of the reasons why she lost. Because a lot of black people stayed home because she really did not excite the black voting base that she probably, like many Democrats do, take for granted. and felt like, they can come at us with the same old shoe shine box, and but we're becoming more sophisticated politically, and so when you want to court the black vote in the future, you got to come up with a new bag of tricks, because the old ones are not working.
Absolutely, and I think it needs to be said that when we're talking about issues like income inequality and the wage gap, the income, the wealth gap rather, and Medicare for all, and all this education reform. When you talk about these issues, yeah, it's nice to have a message of unity and we can do this for all people, but you lose the force behind that message when the people who are literally on the bottom of every economic and social demographic in this country don't hear from those people who are talking about, I'm going to make policies to solve this problem. They don't hear from you how you're going to bring those people who are on the very bottom up to the level of where everybody else is. We're not talking about, solving the wealth gap for middle-class white people.
Right.
Because middle-class white people are rich compared to so-called middle-class black people. Middle-class black people broke.
Yeah, don't look at the nice cars, or don't look at. Trust me, we're paying. Malcolm said that too. Malcolm X said that back in the '60s when he was talking about the black middle class, members of the black middle class bragging about how they're the first black in the neighborhood, and I'm the first black person on the block, and I got this, and he made it clear, which is true today. We pay more for that. Mm-hmm. Trust me, you find black people living around you, if you're white and you live in a sort of decent neighborhood, if there's blacks that's living around you, trust me, their mortgage is more, their interest rate is more, the car that they're driving, trust me, they're paying more for that too.
Their monthly payment is higher, interest rate, everything.
This is not paranoia on our part. This has been documented. That black people, even when they start out with the same credit, even when the credits are equal, the educational level is equal, when all of this stuff is equal, it's been documented that black people still have to pay more. And so the American dream costs more for us. So, as Jacquie said, we covered on this show plenty of times how bad the wealth gap is when you compare it to black Americans and white Americans. Now, of course, a lot of you don't like those gross generalizations because you say, well, I don't have that kind of money, or I don't have this and I have that. But we're dealing with averages. Right. You know what I mean? Look. I don't have the money that black folks in PG County got, Prince George's County. But I do understand that they can't afford to miss a day of work out there,
right,
in order to maintain what they have,
right.
And I understand that it's been documented that if black people were to try to close the wealth gap on our own, it would take 220 some years. Mind you, now we covered this on a previous show. Mm-hmm. Is that's the same amount of time we've been enslaved?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you got 228 years, 230 years that it would take for us to catch up with white people and close the racial gap, but those numbers also represent how long we've been in slavery. So slavery, basically, that 200 and some years is when we wasn't getting paid nothing,
right? And
everybody else was allowed to earn from their labor and earn from their intellectual properties and their inventions and all this stuff. They were allowed to earn from that, where the slaves couldn't. Even when slaves invented things, it was usually the people who owned them that took ownership of that and got rich off of it.
Right.
So here you're talking about that block of time, and so why are we shocked or surprised that it would take like 2 centuries, to catch up with white people?
Yeah, if we did it on our own.
If we did it on our own, and that's why we're advocates on this show, that in order for us to address these type of, and Bernie was right when he talked about, the need for government to be involved, because that's the only entity that we have that is going to correct this. For black people, for white people, all this stuff. If you want, look, they talk about bringing jobs back. They talk about doing this. Well, government has to do that. You want a stimulus package, that's government. You want a jobs bill, that's government. You want to improve the infrastructure, education, that's all government. And so the thing of it is that all we're saying is that in order to right the wrongs with the black community, it's going to take government. It takes government to do that because government had a hand in making things the way that they are today. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're saying. We don't apologize for that message. The message makes sense. And so when we talk about, we're going to go to the article now. Mm-hmm. But so when the author said about do white people vote against their interests, let's see what they have to say.
Right. I mean, so this article is published in Politico magazine. Let me scroll up to the top, you guys. And it's titled exactly what we said it is. Does the white working class really vote against its own interests? The subtitle is Trump's first year in office revived an age-old debate about why some people choose race over class and how far they will go to protect the system. I think it is important to note that when we talk about black people voting against their interests and supporting a Democratic Party that hasn't done squat for us in decades, mm-hmm. The reason black people do that is because we are all trapped in a two-party system, and our alternative is the Republican Party.
Right.
And before the Republican Party and the Democratic Party switched ideologies, during what was that
when the Dixiecrats and all
right.
became Republicans.
Right, during the I forget the name of the phenomenon, but the Southern Strategy.
Right,
that's what it was.
Right.
Man, these hormones are kicking my behind. But when the when conservative Democrats, let me slide back over here for a couple of minutes. When conservative Democrats who were Southern and didn't like the Civil Rights Act being passed, didn't want to support Lyndon Johnson,
right,
and they decided to adhere to socially conservative ideals. They were always socially conservative. These Southern Dixiecrats. Yeah, they became Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, and you always ask the question, what were they conserving? They were conserving white supremacist ideology.
Exactly. So they became Republicans because Goldwater was a Republican, and he basically said, hey, look, if you don't like the way the Democrats are trying to pander to the black people, then you come on over here to the Republican Party. We're not going to do any of that crap. So a bunch of Democrats switched party affiliation to the Republican Party. That's where that switch happened. So you have people who have voted, even if they are poor white people, have voted to conserve that white ideology-based way of life, in which they believe the reason they don't have things is because black people and brown people and immigrants are threatening their stuff and taking their stuff. And those are the people, the working class white voters, that the Democratic Party keeps trying to court, as opposed to advocating for black people and workers and women. Democrats keep trying to court people who continue to vote based on the idea that their race is more important than class. They believe they have more in common with rich white people than they have with poor working class black people and Latinos who are just as poor, who they are just as poor as.
Now the thing of it is, we can't forget that a lot of this stuff was manipulated by the wealthy elites,
right?
Who have, since the Bacon Rebellion, and we spoke about the Bacon Rebellion, when poor whites woke up and realized that, hey, we got something in common with these African slaves and these Native Americans, and they started to push back against the planter class, mm-hmm. And then that's when the planter class came up with the construct of whiteness, because whiteness didn't really exist prior to that. Mm-hmm. And they came up with the construct of whiteness, saying, hey, look, we know that you're poor, but you're white, which
Right.
means that it's in your best interest to protect us from them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they did was they threw out little tokens to the poor whites, as they do even today. They threw out these poor tokens to white people, putting them in, giving them land,
Mm-hmm.
putting them in positions of authority as far as being slave patrol officers, being overseers on plantations, and giving them jobs basically, and basically coming up with this construct of being white.
Right.
There was some benefit of being white, even though you didn't have any money. So it was in your best interest to protect the elites, because we're going to look out for you, and you got to protect us from them, because if they ever got in power, then then you really ain't going to get anything.
Right.
And they're just going to be brutal and stuff to you. So I think that we have to understand where this comes from, and that this is not a new phenomenon.
Right.
I was thinking when you was talking about poor whites and the history of it, I was thinking about how black people have always suffered from the attitudes of poor whites in this country.
What do you mean?
Well, 90% of poor whites was opposed to freeing slaves. During the time of the Civil War, before the Civil War, 90% of poor whites were against freeing slaves, right? Now you go further. A large percentage of poor whites during the Depression were against the New Deal and the policies of the New Deal helping black folks, and especially black farm laborers in the South. They were against that. There's a famous video out during the 1960s when they interviewed working class whites in Detroit and Chicago about the upcoming civil rights. And you still had these working class whites saying that I don't want them living here. They shouldn't have this. Some of them said that, well, I think that they're moving too fast. And so there wasn't this attitude amongst a large majority of poor working class whites to see that their fellow black citizens receive receive the same protection and the same benefits of being an American as they were receiving. It was still a large majority of poor whites saying, no, we're not with that.
Right.
So now we get all the way to the 70s and the 80s, and you see that amongst poor working class whites, that attitude remained consistent. I mean, when Reagan swept into office, Reagan swept into office based on the dog was the welfare queen and all this stuff. This myth that government was giving too much to black folks, and that helped propel Reagan into office. And then so you had this whole new Republican stuff coming through, where and then so Clinton caught on, and Clinton felt like, well, hey, look, if we're going to enlarge our base, then we need to play that game too. So once again, he appealed to working class whites who were suffering under Reagan now, and now it was like, well, we're not going to do you as bad as Reagan and them did, but when it comes to those black folks, we're gonna make sure that we keep our foot on their necks, So and so a lot of poor working class whites was with that, So what I'm saying is that when it comes through historically in this country, poor working class whites have always based their votes, based their support on racial identity. It's funny that we as Black Americans are always accused of identity politics, and we're always accused of when Obama was running for office, and we were accused, well, you only elected Obama, black folks elected Obama because he was black. Well, yeah, for the most part, but I'm sure a lot of Irish Catholics voted for Kennedy when he was running for president. But what I'm saying is that we're always accused of racial politics or identity politics when we discuss how we've been screwed under this system. But yet, when you look at the history of white working class people, they've always voted based on identity politics.
And that is a perfect segue into this article. Because I scrolled down to the section of this article that is important. Now, we've quoted W.E.B. Du Bois several times, and we've quoted one particular essay that he wrote. It published in The Nation magazine in 1958 or 53, where he basically says, I will not vote in the upcoming election. And the reasons he gave for not voting in the upcoming election point to the exact issue so many people are newly awoke and angry about now: the corrupt two-party system.
Right.
Both parties being the two wings of the same evil bird. That quote came from W.E.B. Du Bois, who recognized in 1958 that neither party gives a damn about black people. So there's no point in continuing to vote for either party. And the issues with the two parties drowning out the voices and the messages of third parties was also an issue that Du Bois wrote about in 1958. So none of this is new, y'all. And again, W.E.B. Du Bois writes about this phenomenon in 1935 about white working class voters, poor white people who you would think would have class affinity, because we're hearing this a lot now, right?
Right.
You know, we have more in common, we meaning black people, because you know we are the ones who are being divisive,
right?
Divisive, or however people want to pronounce it. We're the ones who are being divisive when we talk about, look, these particular issues need to focus first and most on black people because we've been impacted first and worst. But when we talk about that, we're told, no, you have the same interests as poor white people, so you need to unite with them.
But that was the same argument that the Bernie crats used with black people, to the point where, okay, we understand that that we need to correct these things, but why don't we just all join together now? And the reason why black people are cynical about that, because we've heard that before.
Right.
So we attach your train to us, and once we get Bernie in there, boy, we're going to make sure everybody gets what they're supposed to get. And we've heard that plenty of times before.
Right. We've heard it before because we've seen it before. And this article proves why that's not going to work, because it's never worked. So in 1935, Du Bois published his most influential treatise, Black Reconstruction, a reconsideration of the period immediately following the Civil War. Reconstruction was a period of time, the very brief period of time in this country, where black political power was a real thing. And what happened after Reconstruction? Racist white people. So one of the historical quandaries that Du Bois addressed was the successful effort of white plantation owners in the 1870s and 80s to build a political coalition with poor, often landless white men to overthrow biracial Reconstruction governments throughout the South. Now, there was this little short period of time when poor white people and poor black people were like, you know what, we're going to overthrow this shit.
Right.
We're going to change this. And what happened? Poor white people, the majority of poor white people, because the white people who were working during Reconstruction with black people were very small in number. It wasn't most white people. I know white people love to think that most white people were abolitionists, and they were anti-slavery, and they were anti-racism, but that just ain't the truth. So can we please stop living in a historical fantasy land?
Right.
We have proof that that was never true. So the theory of laboring class unity, this is what we believe we have the power to fight on today. This is what so many people advocate. The theory of laboring class unity rests upon the assumption that laborers, despite internal jealousies, whatever those internal jealousies are, will unite because of their opposition to the exploitation of the capitalists, wrote Du Bois, who trained at both the University of Berlin and Harvard, and whose grounding in Marxist political economy taught him to view politics through the lens of different but fixed stages in capitalist development. That's a mouthful, right? So, I mean, and I have to say, all these little revolution, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be dismissive, y'all, but all y'all who are just, learning about Marxist theory, we've known who Marx was and his importance to revolution for a long time. Anyway, this would throw white and black labor into one class, he continued, and precipitate a united fight for higher wages and better working conditions. Now, on paper, That's you would think that's what is supposed to happen with people of the same class who have the same economic interests, the same political interests. They're both politically and economically disenfranchised.
And he's being screwed over by the same class.
Thank you, by the same people. We got the same enemy. That, of course, is not what happened. In most southern states, poor whites and wealthy whites forged a coalition that overthrew biracial Reconstruction governments and passed a raft of laws that greatly benefited plantation and emerging industrial elites at the expense of small landowners, tenant farmers, and factory workers. Quote, it failed to work because the theory of race was supplemented by a carefully planned and slowly evolved method, Du Bois wrote, which drove such a wedge between white and black workers that there probably are not today, this was in 1935, there are probably not today in the world two groups of workers with practically identical interests who hate and fear each other so deeply and persistently, and who are kept so far apart that neither sees anything of common interest.
Now stop right there. But I mean, but if you could take that one paragraph that was written in 1935 and apply that right to today.
Yep, that is absolutely right. And the key here that I think we want people to come away with from this discussion, this particular part of this discussion, is that the issue is not that black people are divisive when we are advocating for our issues. The issue is y'all got to convince y'all poor white brothers and sisters that we are not out to take their stuff.
Or that you have more in common with us than you do with the people who fly in on their private jets.
With the name on the side.
Yeah, and who wants to give you these divisive speeches about poor black and brown people who are just coming over like Mongol hordes trying to take what little stuff that you have.
Mongol hordes. This is really good, and we're going to give you a link to this so you can read through it yourself. This is a great article. Du Bois famously posited that the white group of laborers, while they received a low wage, were compensated in part by a sort of public and psychological wage. They were given public deference and titles of courtesy because they were white. Decades before, so many white working class citizens of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin, to say nothing of Alabama, West Virginia, and Mississippi, cast their lot with a party that endeavors to raise their taxes and gut their health care. This is working class voters today. Du Bois identified the problem that we are sitting here wondering, how can these poor white people be so stupid as to vote for these people who want to take stuff from them? Because they really do believe that they have more in common with white people who have everything and who want to take what little bit they have than they do with black people who are in exactly the same position that are actually in a worse position
and not even in the same position.
They really believe that. I've read another article somewhere from somebody, I think they shared it from the Huffington Post, about how working class white people don't like to be called racist, and that's why you can't look. You can call these people whatever you want. The issue is, the fact of the matter is, they vote the way they do because they see more benefit in voting for people who elevate their whiteness than they do voting for people who want to elevate all of us, especially black people.
I mean, all you got to do is look at Trump's recent run for the presidency and see who supported him. You know, I mean, see the David Dukes and all of them coming out of there, you know, and the white nationalists and the alt-right. You know, why is it that they felt that that they had a friend in Trump, that they had a friend in Trump's administration? Why did they feel that?
Right.
Because Trump appealed to that side. Trump appealed to the side of this racial identity. You know, even though he himself probably don't believe in it. But he appealed to that. That's why when you looked at a lot of his rallies when he was running for president, he got his most support when he was downgrading black and brown people.
Yeah.
He got his most support when he talked about the wall. He got his most support when he was talking about law and order and all this stuff.
Back in the old day, the police would have carried him out on a stretcher.
So it's it's not lost on them that this is still in effect today, and this is how you win elections, and this is how you keep the population divided. So so that they can continue to drive us into third world conditions.
Yep. And I wanted to, we're going to stay on this article just a couple more minutes because I wanted to read this other part. Because I want to make sure you understand we're not just sitting here, just trying to bash white people and everything is the fault of white people. No.
But see, the thing of it is, we got to become mature with our political discourse. What I mean by that is, I'm not going to sit, and this is another rule I guess I could add for 2018.
Okay.
I'm not going to sit up here and constantly tell everybody I don't mean all white people.
Well, thank you.
I'm not going to sit up here and constantly keep on saying, but I'm not all white people, not all white people. We understand that it's not all white people. Just like we understand that a lot of things in the black community that happens that we don't like, we understand that we're not a part of that, that a lot of our black friends are not a part of that. So we got to become a little bit more mature when we have these discussions. There's an old saying that if it doesn't apply, let it the fuck fly. You know what I mean? Like if it doesn't apply to you, then it doesn't apply to you. But see, the reason why we bring this up, because it applies to enough of you to make it an issue for me. And that's what it is. It applies to enough of white folks where it impacts my life, and it impacts the life of my children, and it impacts the life of my grandchildren. So that's why we're bringing this stuff up. I don't believe that undeserved bashing should be given to anybody. But what we're saying is that if we're going to correct this situation, if we're going to stop being played by politicians, if we're going to stop having politicians treat us like the only thing we care about is the color of our skin, and that's the only thing that matters, not jobs, not a better living wage, not health care, none of this stuff. Oh, the only thing that matters to me is keeping Mexicans out or Muslims out. The only thing that matters to me is what next country we should be bombing. What matters to me is all of these other things that really is not making my life better. So what we're saying is that the way that we're going to deal with this is, first of all, we got to be able to talk about it.
Right.
We got to be able to talk about it. We got to be able to get over the little discomfort that a lot of these things have. We've been a country for like 300 or 400 years. And so 300 or 400 years, man, we did a lot of shit. And a lot of shit happened in 300 or 400 years. So, I mean, in the course of all that shit happening in 300 or 400 years, I mean, man, it's going to take us to really deal with this. And it's not always going to be pretty. We know that our country doesn't have a perfect history. Right. So what we're saying is that the only way that we will be able to deal with this kind of stuff is that we do our part, and white folks, you got to do your part. You know what I mean? Stop being mad because I bring it up. Stop being mad because we talk about it. No, the thing of it is the fact that we're never going to be a great nation unless we make sure that everybody, ain't that what y'all always tell me? Oh, no, it's not a black agenda. It should be a human agenda. Well, all right, I'm appealing to your human agenda stuff. If it's all about being a human agenda, if it's all about being inclusive, if it's all about us all coming together, then why don't we do that? Why don't you do your part and start backing policies that's going to help uplift the black community and the rest of the poor community, but especially blacks, because as we have displayed on this show time and time again, that our poverty was not created because we just made wrong decisions. Yep. Our poverty is not created because we're breeding. Our poverty is not created because we didn't work hard. Our poverty is created because, number one, we weren't paid for building this country, and then we were systematically kept away from being assimilated so that we can take advantage of the prosperity of this country. So this is why we find ourselves in a situation today. So that's our history. We have to accept that,
Right.
and we have to deal with that. So we're trying to change it. We're not going to change it with niceties. We're not going to change this with wishing that this history didn't exist. We're not going to change this by coming up with these, invest in Bitcoin, invest in this, invest. No, we're going to change this by us coming together as citizens and saying, damn it to hell, when the next legislation you pass, we have to make sure that that we have better schools in the black community. We're going to have to make sure that housing is a right, not just affordable, that housing is a right, healthcare is a right, education is a right, and that we work towards that. That we work towards a living wage. That we raise that people can make a decent wage. That all of these things. Don't nobody want handouts. But the thing of it is the fact that we won't push for policies that will allow people to be able to produce for themselves. So I'm sorry if no, I'm not sorry.
No, you're not.
I'm not sorry.
No.
It's difficult. It's a difficult conversation to have, but try living it. I mean, you don't like hearing it, but try living, try existing in this self-contained box, this contained box that was erected by decades and sometimes centuries of government policies. You try living in that box, and no matter how hard you work, no matter how hard you do this, no matter how hard you do that, the bar is always moved. You know what I mean? So so what we're saying is the fact that we're not going to back down from that, and that and what we're trying to say that if there is going to be a coalition of progressive whites and blacks and others, well, especially whites and blacks, that we're going to get together and change this society, then there has to be mutual respect. And there has to be an understanding that we got two different experiences in this country, and that's okay. We didn't create it, but this is where we are. And so we don't want to continue this legacy on to the next generations. Then we need to lick our wounds, and we need to pull up our big pants, look this country in the eye, and be like, you know what? I'd be damned if I want to pass this on to the next generation. That's how we get there.
Absolutely. And we can't continue. Those of us in the progressive circles, and I understand that a lot of people don't have this history that we carry around with, because we do love history here in Luqman Nation. And a lot of people don't understand that the history of why race was created. Race wasn't created necessarily to oppress black people. That was a part of it. Race was really created to control white people.
That's exactly why it was created.
Race was created to convince white people to continue to vote for and support people in positions of authority who will not do anything for white people other than make them feel special that they're white, as long as they can keep non-white people on the bottom.
And white was also created to make sure that white would always remain a majority.
Exactly.
Because Italians weren't always considered white.
Italians weren't always considered white. The Irish came here and they were considered doggone near Africans.
Right.
They were called African. The Irish were called the Irish niggers.
Right.
At some point the Italians were called the Italian niggers.
Yeah, Italians. If you came from if you were Jewish, if you came from Eastern Europe and you was a Polish or Slavic background, you wasn't automatically designated white. But what happened is that white was used strategically, like it was during Bacon's Rebellion, in order to get poor whites, separate poor whites from the rest of poor people, just like it was used during Reconstruction, and they use white now. So it's like, in order to maintain, now you see it being played with the Latinos. Now when the census come around, it's like, now most Latinos have African blood, but yet when they put down, it's like, well, are you black but not Latino? Are you Latino but not black? Right. And so now you got Latinos who identify themselves as white, even though some of them as dark as me, because it's not a racial thing. It's a construct that allows the so-called designation of being white to always be in the majority.
That's right. And the conversations we have about the policies that we all need to support in order for all of us to work toward a more equal society, we are not going to get those policies passed, and we can't even have those conversations if we do not understand that white people, even poor working class white people, vote the way they do for people like Donald Trump, for people like Ronald Reagan, even for people like Bill Clinton, and they remain poor. They vote the way they do because they value their whiteness. Let me finish up with this article.
Yeah, we have to end there. We can't even get to the last.
I know, this was such a good, such a good section, session. So this is the last part of this article I'm going to read to you guys. I want to make sure you understand what we're talking about here. This was right after the Civil War, when working class Southern whites could participate in the political process, because again, the landowning wealthy white people would they instituted poll taxes on poor white people too.
Yeah, they did.
So poor white people, just like black people, poor white people who were sharecroppers, they had a poll tax too.
Right.
Poor white people who didn't own any land, if they couldn't pay that poll tax that year, this was also true of black people, but if they couldn't pay that poll tax that year, they could not only not vote that year, but they also forfeited their right to vote the next year.
Yeah, I mean, poor whites also had to put up with literacy tests too.
Exactly. Here's the difference. When working class Southern whites could participate in the political process, they often jettisoned their natural class interests with poor black people in favor of racial solidarity with the very rich white people who denied them full access to their voting rights too.
Right.
Historians have focused special attention on the rise and fall of the readjuster movement, a biracial coalition that controlled the legislature, governor's office, and most federal posts in Virginia from 1879 to 1883, forged in opposition to a conservative Democratic establishment that had shuttered schools, imposed regressive taxes, and favored creditors over debtors. Ain't nothing new under the sun.
Nothing changed.
Nothing new under the sun. The alliance passed a raft of measures that presaged much of the populist movement's agenda in the coming years. For a time, it held, but in 1883, Democrats campaigned with intense focus on the issue of interracial marriage and miscegenation. Mm-hmm. You don't want those black men soiling your pure white daughters, do you? A rare phenomenon, intermarriage wasn't even common.
I wouldn't think it would be.
Black people in 1883, black men were not like, I got to have me a white woman.
I guess it wouldn't be. I mean, the penalty for it was too much of a price to take.
Yeah. A rare phenomenon that nevertheless struck a raw nerve with white workers and farmers. They warned that readjuster rule would result in, quote, mixed schools now and mixed marriages for the future, end quote. What did you say about politics always being about what's coming down the line?
What's coming down the line.
These people, they knew that these conservative Democrats weren't going to change their reality as far as their economics and their access to the system was concerned, but they were concerned that their daughters were going to end up marrying a black man, and they didn't want that to happen. That's what politics is. What you do today that affects your progeny in the future.
That's right.
That's what politics is. It worked. Conservative, quote, bourbon Democrats regained control of state government and reintroduced regressive one-party rule that benefited a small minority of Virginians. Let me scroll down to this quote that you need to read and then we'll be done. Southern liberals in the 1930s and 40s applied a sharp class focus and concluded that wealthy Democrats wanted In historian Gavin Wright's words, to keep labor cheap and divided. The white liberal writer Lillian E. Smith famously captured this thinking in her story about Two Men and a Bargain, which began, once upon a time down south, a rich white man made a bargain with a poor white. You boss the nigger, I'll boss the money.
And guess what? You still see that being played today, even though the poor white man ain't bossing any niggas now. It's not as defined like that now.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happening is that you still see the same paradigm in place.
Mm-hmm. It's the same
it's
thing.
It's the same paradigm. And what's the result? Why do you think we're fighting for 15? Why do you think that we're fighting for all this? Because the object of the game was to keep labor cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they done, even to this day. And you're not going to see anything different with Trump. You're not going to see anything. I mean, this tax bill they just passed really is a great grandchild of those policies right there. Again, keeping labor cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So the evidence is there. The evidence is clear that that voting on racial solidarity alone hasn't worked.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't worked for whites, and the damn sure ain't worked for us. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
that's the double-edged sword.
yeah, it hasn't worked for white folks, and the damn sure ain't worked for us. But it has worked for the wealthy class.
Mm-hmm.
And the wealthy class is about their interests.
Mm-hmm.
They're about keeping themselves in power. They're about making sure that all of that prosperity is passed on to their progeny. So it's already set in place that this feudal existence that we live in this country has to be broken.
Mm-hmm.
And all we talk about revolution all the time, and that's what it's going to take to overturn this system. It's going to take revolution, and it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take to the point where we have to see each other as all being affected by the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's going to have to do, and that's how we begin to start changing, these things around us.
Yeah, and the people, and I think we need to make this clear, the people who need to see that they need to align with the people on the bottom, it's not us. It's not you, the progressives, my progressive friends. Please stop telling, no, not please. Here's my rule for 2018. I'm not going to ask people to do nothing no more. I'm not begging you. I'm not going to ask nicely. We don't have time for this. Last year, the statistics said that in 36 years, black people will have zero wealth in this country. That was 2017.
Mm-hmm.
35 years from now, black people will have zero wealth in this country. If white voters, if working class white voters, if poor white voters do not understand that the only way their situation is going to change is if they fight with us, then in 36 years, 35 years, not only will we not have any wealth, but white people, working class white people, poor white people, will be closer to our level of wealth today than they thought they would ever get.
That's right. And one thing before we end the show is, I'm looking at some of the comments, and I don't have time to go through them all, but there's some of you out there that think that this conversation is racist. And let me just say this briefly. It's really sad that that many people consider this discussion that we're talking about as racist. These are the same folks that don't have a problem when black people were being killed all in the street by cops, and when and all of the situations that we go through, they're silent as hell. They ain't got nothing to say about none of that. Or they'll make excuses for it. But then the moment that black people start talking about our issues, and we start talking about what we need as citizens in this country, and what we need, not just citizens in this country, but being descended from people who built this country, who defended this country,
Mm-hmm.
who contributed every way to making this country what it is today. We have a stake in that. We have a stake in that. And the fact that you got 45 million black Americans right now, the majority living in poverty, is a disgrace. Is a disgrace to the legacy of this country. And for those who think that what we're talking about is racism, then stick around because you're going to hear some more shit. Because we are we are pushing forward. And we have just as much right as everybody else who has come to these shores and who have claimed their part of the pod. We have even more right, actually, than even folks who came after us. Some of us been in this country longer than some of you people that's up here talking about what we're talking about as racist. A lot of us been here in this country much longer. And so we have every right to demand that this country live up to its creed and live up to its promises, you know. And we understand that we're not going to be able to get that just by wishing for it. We got to fight for it, you know. And you know, nobody's talking about killing white folks. Nobody's talking about hating white people. Nobody's talking about none of that stuff. And if all you got out of what we said today was that it was racist, then you're part of the problem.
So, thank you for tuning in to Live in Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Luqman Nation tonight. We will be live again on Sunday.
Sunday, but you got Pit Bulls and Politics on Saturday.
Yep, on Saturday, and we may have a special broadcast on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
On Thursday morning, I will be on Sputnik Radio with Lee Stranahan and Garland Nixon on Fault Lines really early in the morning at 8:20 a.m. Please tune in to that if you are awake, Eastern Time. And on Friday at I think 3 o'clock, we will be live in the studio with Eugene Perrier and Sean Blackman. I don't know why I like to say his name like that. On By Any Means Necessary. Both will be streamed live on Facebook, and so check them out, look them up, check out both of their shows. We don't deal with lightweights in Luqman Nation, so we think you'll enjoy their shows. Hey, subscribe to us on YouTube. We do have a YouTube channel. Look for us on YouTube under Luqman Nation, Luqman Nation. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Follow us here on Facebook. Consider becoming a patron. I always get that wrong. Consider becoming a patron or contributing a one-time contribution to our GoFundMe campaign. We are getting back on track with our documentary, Baltimore After the Fire. You can find us on GoFundMe and Patreon under, guess what? Luqman Nation, Luqman Nation. Thank you all very much for joining us tonight. We'll continue this discussion, the part that we didn't get a chance to get to about what's going on among the Black conscious community.
This is our time to jump on. This is our turn to dig into some black asses this time.
Yeah, so we're equal opportunity diggers in Luqman Nation. And thanks y'all for joining us. Share this video and check us out next time. Be really good to each other. Peace.